Call this meeting to order.
The kid doing years leave. Sounds good.
My name is Colleen Stanley. I'm chairperson for this meeting tonight. Along with me is Mr. Arcani and Mr. Visconti. We also have here with us Mayor Mark Boughton and David St. Hilaire, the Director of Finance, and Corporation Counsel Les Pinter. And tonight we are speaking about the administrator's salaries. Mr. Boughton, or Mayor Boughton, asked to refer this to a committee to discuss the salary increases for 4 school administrators. And I was wondering if you'd like to start the conversation off and tell us a little bit about your request.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Appreciate you being patient as well. I asked for the committee meeting to discuss a decision made by the Board of Education as it relates to their cabinet level staff people. Just to give you some background, as you know, we have several unions that work for the Board of Education, the Administrators Union, the Teachers Union, there's a Custodian Union, there's also paraprofessionals as well as other aides that are part of a larger union. And the cabinet level folks are not part of a union. So those raises are, salaries are discretionary, determined by the superintendent, obviously recommendations made to the superintendent. The board then discusses that and makes an offer. In the original budget submission from the Board of Ed to the City of Danbury, City Council, myself, there was, in the request for $4.2 million of new money, there was a line item that was dedicated towards salary increases for the cabinet level. As you know, in my budget presentation, I recommended $2 million. Of course, the assumption being that they wouldn't spend, that they wouldn't be able to, out of the remaining $2.2 million, they would cut out the raises and cut out a whole bunch of other stuff that, frankly, we just can't afford right now. Well, that's not what they opted to do. They opted to give raises to the cabinet, and they have said that part of this is a larger global restructuring of duties. I can tell you that even now, more recently, it's shown that's not really what the case. But my concern is about 2 things. One, it's about message, about when we go to the taxpayers and we ask for a greater contribution, we have to look them in the eye and say we've done everything we can to cut every possible area, but still preserve services. We also, when we go to the taxpayers and we're funding the education side of the budget, have to say that they've done the same and that this budget is a reflection of what the ability of the taxpayers, but also what the needs of the community are. We can't lose that credibility to the taxpayers, and I can't lose that credibility to you, the City Council, if we're funding something which I said specifically we wouldn't fund, which is raises. And so my concern is that from a policy side, it's just bad timing to be giving raises. And let's just be clear, these are in the order of magnitude of about 2.5%, 3%. But remember that a lot of these folks make significantly more than our highest paid city personnel, which I actually think is Antonio, right? Mm-hmm. It's not me. Not David. It's certainly not me. So 3% of $180,000 is a significant amount of money versus 3% of $40,000 for a clerical person, which is $1,200. So there's an order of magnitude here that's difficult. There's a message that's a problem, and then it also is a segue into negotiations. The Board of Ed is going to be going into negotiations with the teachers union. It's going to be hard for them to say, you guys can't have raises, but we can, because the first thing that the teachers union do will say, well, they had money to give raises to all the cabinet, so clearly they have money to be able to give us a raise. And so now you have what amounts to about $30,000, and I'll explain where the breakdown is, of raises given to the cabinet level, really is going to cost you over $2 million of raises to the teachers, because they're going to point and say, if they got raises, why shouldn't we get a raise? So it's not just about that small amount of money. It seems insignificant, and at a $114 million budget, it probably is. But it's also about the impact that decision has on future negotiations. Now also understand that I'm going to negotiations with fire, police, DMEA, Teamsters, all of our unions on this side as well. Again, it's about the message that we're sending and what the city can afford. So, and also understand that as of right now, our cabinet level staff, my staff, has not received a raise in 18 months. And, and it hasn't gone over very well. And it really makes it hard for me to tell them no when the Board of Ed is over there giving out raises to everybody. So for those reasons, I wanted this committee to look at this particular issue. Now, understanding what our legislative statutory authority is, we can't take back the raises. We can only decide whether or not we want to cut the appropriation from roughly $114 million to $113,970,000, right? So that's really all you can do. They could still go give the raises tomorrow, and they probably will, to be frank with you. I don't think we're going to, but I also think we have to, at some point, somewhere, say enough. We can't continue to fund these kinds of things. It's unsustainable going forward. Next year's budget and the year after are going to be, just an absolute challenge for us. I can't think of any adjective that'll explain that. Every time you give a raise or a benefit or a perk, you move the ball a little bit farther away. The goalpost gets farther for me to be able to make the numbers work and minimize the impact on our taxpayers. So it's a problem. Now let me just tell you one thing that the board did do. Many of you remember Louis Bray, who was a previous director of personnel. Louis took a job in, I think, Weston and another community. His salary was $110,000 a year. Comparably speaking, our director of personnel makes about $100,000 a year, but that's a whole other story. When Louis left, they hired somebody who is an attorney and added $20,000 to the salary line item. Now, when people leave here, I'm like, great, cut the $10,000, put the money back to the taxpayers, and then they let them earn up to where the previous person was, right? Many years ago, it was sort of controversial, Fred, but if you remember, Mike Siri retired in midterm, and when Dean Esposito was appointed as a town clerk, he went from $78,000 to $45,000. He wasn't happy, and we said, well, Mike was. We were saying that Mike was earning that money after a reflection of 22 years of service to the city. So so he had all that, and you'll get there eventually. You just got to spend 20 years. What they did is they added $20,000 to salary, so the salary is $125,000 plus a $5,000 tax-free annuity to it, so it's $130,000. And they said, well, look, we're going to, this person's going to be our labor attorney, and we're going to reduce costs on the labor side. I can tell you right now that they went right back to their old labor attorney and are still using the old labor attorney, plus now they have this new attorney. So that argument, I don't think really holds water. But, when we look at people leaving the organization, we look at it as an opportunity to maybe cut back on some of the benefit, take away the car if there's a car, remove cut the salary down, change the insurance, change the pension, and we've done all that with incoming new employees for them. The other thing is they gave a raise to somebody who's retiring in February. So, and they've eliminated the position. So the person's going to retire. They're not going to fund the position, or they're not going to have the position going forward. And I just don't, again, I don't understand why somebody would give somebody a raise when they're leaving in February.
Currently a vacant.
Apparently. I mean, I'm not going to cast any aspersions. I don't know. I wasn't part of those discussions, but it just seems to be kind of strange. So, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that the goalpost gets moved on us all the time. I'm frustrated that, it's just so difficult for us to make these numbers in this economy, and then you see decisions like this, and I just don't get it.
Agreed. I know I sat through many Board of Education meetings and heard about all the cuts that they were making, and we're not happy with what they received to begin with. But I was just wondering if maybe Les could talk about if we were to take the amount, the $35,000 or whatever it is, $35,000 to $40,000, and put it in a reserve, if that's legal for us to do, and how does it affect the Board of Education's side?
There's somewhat charted borders here because it's, although there's case law, the subject out there, not exactly on point, but the way the mayor explained, and I understood the situation exactly as he just said, that what happened here. The legal arguments here would be rather extended. I'm not even going to get into those. There are a number of issues that I've seen in the cases that would be used here. But the short story for this purpose is that according to the relevant law, which is your own charter as well as the state law, that a financing board, which includes in this case the city council, appropriates a certain amount of money to its Board of Education. If it exceeds that appropriation, then there has to be a supplemental appropriation approval by the same body, the city council. All right, so now the question is, why is this supplemental appropriation? I've determined that it is a supplemental appropriation based on a couple of facts. One is that the city council was not apprised of the allocation of this amount of money for that purpose. The relevant minutes of the committee of the board of the city council, Colleen, your committee, indicated that when Councilman Seabury brought up the question of cabinet raises, the comment that's a record in the minutes was that this will be dealt with later. The implication of that is that it was not to be in the appropriated budget, and in fact, based on that alone, it would not be in the appropriated budget. Therefore, it would have to be a supplemental appropriation based on that fact alone. Additionally to that, it's implied within the approval of the Board of Finance or City Council in this case that when it appropriates money to the school board, it appropriates it with knowledge of what it's being appropriated for. And as a subset, but an important subset of that, it also has to be aware of an appropriation when it has a multi-year effect. And probably of all the points, that may be the strongest point, where that if the Board of Education, subsequent to the appropriation by the City Council, provided a salary benefit that extends into further years, that is not in accordance with the appropriation for that year. So there are a number of arguments here that give credence to the City Council being able to reserve that amount, or authorizing the mayor to reserve that amount of money, whatever the amount is, and they can deal with it, the council can deal with it as a supplemental appropriation and give it to them, or they can continue to reserve that amount of money and not provide it. Now, second, final, as to the question of whether the Board of Education can nonetheless allocate that amount of money to the cabinet members, it's possible that itself could be an ultra-virus act. An ultra-virus act meaning that it's an act beyond the capability of the Board of Education to do, for the reasons I mentioned in the appropriation problem itself. That is something that would have to be tested. It's very possible, as the mayor suggested before, that they could do it and just, wave their finger at the city council. I think they might have a problem with that, though, because of the issues I first mentioned. So that can be a back burner issue, but the point of fact is that they have a problem with doing it this way, essentially denying the council the opportunity to factor this into their appropriation. I think that's the biggest problem here, supporting the restriction.
I appreciate you making that point, because one of my major concerns was that if we were to put the $35,000 to $40,000 in reserve, that's exactly what will happen, that they would still receive their raises, that they would still receive their appropriated raises, and we really would maybe affect the school. And also, once the money is appropriated, and it's not like we're putting the money back into our taxpayers' pockets.
There's nothing you can do about that if they decide to allocate that anyway, except to file an action of some sort, and we can talk about that also, to try to join that activity. It's possible you can do that. Again, that's untested. That's something that would be an interesting thing to see. I mean, since it's a relatively small amount of money, it may not be noticeable in the allocation to whatever they want to use it for, but as the mayor has indicated, the message would be sent in the first case by reserving the funds. An additional message would be sent and saying, if you guys continue down the road of actually allocating this anyway, we may have other resources and measures we can look at.
Do we have any questions from the council? Mr. Visconti?
Through the chair to Corporation Council. You mentioned, Les, that this could be tested by the Board of Ed. if we were to do this, take the money back? What are we talking, when you use the word tested, are we talking litigation or whatever?
They would file in court a request for what's called a declaratory judgment. And that means that they would put the issue in the table in front of the court, the city would be called in, and the court would essentially hear arguments, and the court would render, essentially, it's not a judgment after a full case, it's a shorter version of a case, but a judgment would be rendered on that issue by the court.
And follow up, where would we stand due to the arbitration award? Does that, what kind of role does that actually play, if any, in this?
Nothing in this.
Nothing in this?
No.
Yeah, they're not union.
Okay. One more, to the finance director. Do we have any type of figure here that we could use, or we just really don't know just how much is involved here?
It's, I think it's in the letter, right? Is it in the,
Well, it really depends on whether it goes through or not. You know, if you want to, if it's about 30,000,
Yeah, I'm in
but that's not benefits included on that. I mean, there's
No, that-
FICA, everything. Is that an inclusive number?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's 35,300, I believe. So.
35,003?
And that includes our, not just straight selling, that includes some, as I mentioned, sorry, Mr. Chairman, but as I mentioned, there's the annuity.
Deferred.
Here, there's a deferred comp program that public employees have, and the raises for, in addition to.
Thank you.
That include that, Mayor?
That includes that. Now, Dr. Pasquarella has indicated he'll return his raise after he receives it.
His raise is included in here?
Yes, but only Dr. Pasquarella.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, what was the question you just asked about? The Board of Ed could possibly?
Sure.
If you reserve the money, the Board of Ed has that remedy, at least that remedy to challenge that reservation of funds. They can test that with that legal remedy.
Mr. Arcani?
Through the chair to the mayor, who actually requested this? Was it the Board of Ed, or was it actually the administrators that requested this raise? Do you know?
I think there was a lot of discussion before the end of the last school year in July when this all broke. And this was a proposal by the superintendent to the Board of Ed with the idea that, well, there's an ongoing theme that I hear a lot on the Board of Ed side that, you want good people, you got to pay them. My response to that is with 10% unemployment, there's a lot of really super unemployed education people out there that would jump at some of the jobs at cabinet level that we have. So that to me doesn't hold water now. Now, if it's 5 years ago when the economy's roaring, yeah, we had a hard time retaining people over salary issues. So it really originated with them. They brought it to the board, and then the board ratified it.
Was this in a projected? Was this in a salary increase that was projected, say, last year or the year before, that every year they're going to receive this, or is this something new this year? Do you know?
I don't know if it was in. I know it was in the budget submitted to us, which they have to submit by February 1st of each year, right? It was in there. I spotted it. I even asked about it to some of the board members who indicated to me that it wasn't supposed to be in there. So the assumption I had is when I proposed giving half of what they requested, that the first thing they would throw out would be the raises, right? I mean, that would be the first discretionary, non-contractual amount of money. Well, we won't do raises. We'll lay off so many people. We'll do whatever to get to the number we needed to be at. And then actually, I think Councilman Seaver actually asked them in the meeting about it. And there was sort of this, well, we'll have to see kind of thing.
And have any administrators, non-union administrators, received the raise this year?
In the city, we have not done raises on the city side. We are certainly, one of the challenges I put out to, just to be transparent here, that I put out to our administrators was, if you can find me, I think the number was 1.5 times whatever the cost of the raises would be in savings, be it the reduction of people, new way of doing things, revenue generation, I'll go back and revisit the issue. But I put a challenge to them to go and save us some money before I'll fund any raises. And it's been 18 months, so it's been a long time.
And there have been layoffs in the schools system?
That's debatable. I don't think anybody actually lost their job. I think they did cut positions.
Paraprofessionals.
They cut the paraprofessionals at kindergarten, but they also cut some teaching positions. I just spoke to the superintendent this morning. There's an additional $1.3 million that the federal government has authorized. My counsel to the board was to save that money for next year, because there's not going to be an increase in the Board of Ed budget next year. They differ, and they want to hire 7 people back and spend half of that money now and save half of the money for next year. So,
But wasn't the
So
stimulus
all in all,
money
we have-
meant to hire back teachers that they let go?
yeah, but they really didn't let any physical people. They may have cut positions, but they didn't.
Oh, I see, okay.
You know, the actual, maybe a couple lost their
So it's
jobs.
actually been $55,300, counting the personnel director.
No, that counts. That $35,000 includes the personnel director.
Okay,
Yeah. The increase in their salary, I included that.
okay.
It was a raise to the position.
Thank you. Well, I believe the city council, and I know we have some department heads here, not going to like this, I think the city council is going to have to send out a very strong message to this economic climate that, you all got to tighten that belt. And there's people, an awful lot of people are hurt. I think my decision. Thank you.
Connie,
I was just going to ask if there was anything David would like to add to it?
I'm on the same page with you. That's my
I'm sorry.
opinion.
Mr. Curran?
Well, I think the mayor already said it, but I think it should be stressed that I think the bigger issue here is what we're looking at next year. Because this sends a hell of a message to the union. Because the union's going to come in next year, and I'll guarantee you they'll go to arbitration, and they'll win an arbitration
Based on
the
this.
grounds that they got a 2% raise, the administrators got a 2% raise. That is a big hammer to go into arbitration with. And just like the mayor said, this is not a $30,000 item. We're talking a couple $1 million here now next year. That's a guarantee.
Mr. St. Hilaire?
The financial situation is as the mayor said, it's not getting, there are no additional funds coming our way from anywhere right now. You know, the state is not, no matter what happens in November, you know, the state is not going to have a windfall of money coming their way from anyone, anywhere.
I would disagree.
Oh, okay.
Danbury will be all set.
Danbury will be all set. Okay, so let's keep our fingers crossed there. But
Just kidding.
the bottom line is it's still very difficult, and it will be for the foreseeable future. All right? And I don't think you can make promises of the future that you quite frankly can't keep. And that's what you're doing when you do that. And you know, I think you know, you got 10% unemployment out there. The economy is very difficult, and it's in my department we're doing everything we can to run a tight ship, and it's becoming
Doing more.
difficult every day, more difficult, and we're, you know, the mayor is laying the line, and we're doing everything we can to keep the line, you know, on the taxes. That you know, we're looking out 3 years.
And we've never done that before. Usually it's always been, well, how do we get through this year? How do we get through next year? Dave and I have been doing a lot of 3 to 5 year planning to try to model out where we'll be in that time, because we want to try as much as we can to hold the line on spending until the economy turns around. But, Madam Chairman, I just want to say, again, in the interest of full transparency, if the cabinet of the, like my cabinet, who I said, all right, you guys want raises, you better go figure out how to pay for it. I'm challenging you to go save money 1.5 times what you think you'll be able to, so that we can pocket some money for our taxpayers. Do more with less, layoffs, whatever you come up with. If the Board of Ed cabinet level had come back with some concessions, either on benefits, you know, insurance plans, the annuity, you know, or something like that, then you're in a better position for negotiations. Because negotiations are always a give and take. General wage increase, we know we need significant changes to our medical plan. Well, if you just give out the raise without getting anything back, even if it's with non-union folks, when you go in, and I don't know what the strategy of the board is, but when they go into negotiations with the teachers, and they say, we want zeros for next year, I'm going to say, you didn't take a zero, why should I? And it's a hard argument. You know, you got to give them that side of the
Well, I
argument.
really don't like to think to create layoffs so that the upper management can get raises.
No, but I'm just saying, don't
It's
fill
not.
positions, I guess, is what I mean.
Right.
You know, if you
Just want-
can double up on duties or have
Right.
somebody do something, whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're saving so much on your salary and your insurance and pension.
Mr. Seabury?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A question I have, and I know that Mr. Acanti asked, but in the spring, when they were presenting all their doom and gloom to us, there's going to be all kinds of teachers laid off. We don't have any idea if they were laid off. I know you said they were cutting positions, but they were talking about laying off all kinds of 20-some-odd teachers in the spring, and then we had to react to that. So we don't know, like we said.
I don't have a head count, and one option for the committee may want to continue and invite Dr. Pescarolo to explain that. Well, okay. Just threw that out there.
Well, I think I'm pretty well decided.
I can try to look. I can try to get that data for you for the council.
Yeah, we can get that.
Yeah. What's the final head count?
Yeah, and we can use it next year,
Right.
too. Are there any more questions? And if there are no more questions, I'd like to ask for a motion. Mr. Arcani?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to recommend the reservation of the allocation of $35,300 from the Board of Education, Danbury Schools annual budget allocation 2010-2011 for the school's cabinet salary increases inappropriately designated to that purpose as a result of such actions being taken without the City Council prior knowledge and authorization. Thank you.
So,
Is there any discussion on that motion?
Can I just speak to that just for a second?
Sure.
Since the school officials are not here, I imagine that the response from them would be related to the issues that I described to committee earlier. You know, the allocation, the appropriation by the city council to the school board. They can use it as they will. I expect those may be some of the arguments. I don't want to get into those because it's a public meeting, and given the circumstances that could arise, we don't want to get into that. But I just wanted to, since this session is a public session, to make the committee aware that the school board may have a response to that. We're prepared for that response on issues that I mentioned before.
Any other discussion on that motion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming.